Hi everyone, welcome to GMR's channel. In this video, we'll discuss a model game in the King's Indian Defense for black side. There are like hundreds of great games that have been played in the King's Indian, and among them, I'm choosing one of the earliest games that have been played in the King's Indian. This game is played in the 1953 Zurich Candidates tournament between Mark Taimanov and Miguel Najdorf. This specific tournament, the 1953 Zurich Candidates, is widely considered to be one of the greatest tournaments ever played. Probably one of the strongest candidates, or probably the strongest candidates. And King's Indian was a common guest in that tournament. Several ideas were revealed in the tournament, and King's Indian players who wish to really learn from this about the King's Indian, it's best to start studying from this tournament. Two great players, Najdorf and Bronston, they wrote exceptional books on this specific tournament, and that might be a very good place to start. To begin with, c4, g6, and knight c3, bishop g7, the starting point of the King's Indian defense. And white has like several options at this point. Knight f3, bishop e2, bishop e3, bishop g5, f3. Like almost all logical moves have been tried in this position by white players, and knight f3 remains as one of the main tries. And bishop to e2, e5, castle, knight c6, d5, knight e7. I think even today this is considered as probably the main line against the King's Indian. And here knight e1 is the starting point of the line that's called as Mar Del Plata. Today everyone knows this as the Mar Del Plata variation. That mainly happens because of a game that was played between Najdorf and Gligoric in 1953. They played that game in Mar Del Plata, in that city, and that is where Gligoric came up with one of the best plans that we all know today, which is quite normal. All King's Indian players automatically play this plan, but that was the first game that occurred. As we progress, we'll check it out. And here knight d7, bishop e3, and black continues with f5, f3, f4. And typical to King's Indian, whenever the kings are castled on the same side, black starts expanding with f5. So this maneuver with knight d7 followed by f5 is common in King's Indian, and black starts rolling down the pawns on the king side, which is quite normal to this variation. And white continued with knight b3. This was not the first time this position occurs, and I made a small research on this position. Apparently, a few strong players have played this position before Gligoric, and most of the players went with rook f6 at this point. But apparently, white did quite well. Black's attack didn't really go through very well on the king side, and this is one of the games that Taimanov played earlier against Bronston, and he did quite well in that game. Like apparently, white went on to win, as black's attack was not really very much successful on the king side. So coming back to this knight d3, knight f6 is what Najdorf played in this game, which was basically a copy of the game that he played against Gligoric. Gligoric played this knight f6 move and the following plan against Najdorf himself a few months prior to this game. Now c5, knight g6. Yeah, this plan is pretty commonly played today. The point is rook c1, rook f7 with the idea of bishop f8. The point is the rook on f7 keeps the c7 square under control. In case of cd6, cd6, knight b5, there is no knight c7 or rook c7. Black doesn't have to worry about that. On the other hand, the bishop on f8 will protect the d6 pawn. So this comes up with a beautiful plan where everything is protecting one another and black is ready for a attack on the king side after this. So this plan was first played by Gligoric against Mijual Najdorf, and Najdorf, after a few months, he basically like comes up with the same plan that he lost against, and he uses this in this game to win as black. C takes d6, c takes d6, and g4. Already the attack begins on the king side, and the next move is incredible. Black immediately sacrifices a pawn for the sake of attack on the king side. So this basically opens up the lines for the black's pieces to attack the white king from here. So obviously white has to take it. And from here, the way black mobilizes his pieces on the king side looks quite strong. Knight h5 followed by bishop e7. This is an important moment in the game where, this is probably like trying to bring in the last resource to defense with knight d1, knight e3 was considered the best strike. Apparently, at least computers like this position. Knight b1 was played in the game. As you will see in this position from here onwards, white's pieces will be kind of struggling to find the correct placement, and because of that, there won't be any proper coordination among the white pieces, and black's attack will gain strength as the game progresses. Continued with bishop d7 followed by bishop g5. Now with bishop g5, the point is black is preparing to get his bishop to e3. It's really annoying to have a bishop like this where it's limiting the white king to a great extent. Basically, like every single piece is walking towards white's king side, and the attack starts from here. And I think with this, the final preparation is also done. Black more or less mobilized every single piece into the attack, and from here, the usual idea is when you have all the pieces in the attack like this, it's time for sacrifice basically. So let's see how the game concludes. Rook d1, and before black starts the attack in this position, he comes up with an important move which also helps him in the attack on the king side. So this is a very interesting moment. Those who wish to find the correct idea for black can pause the video at this point and try to find out the correct idea for black. The clue will be maybe like before you start the attack on the king side yourself, see what are your opponent's resources and make sure your opponent doesn't have any counterplay, and so that you can continue with your attack on the king side. Black played b5, which is a beautiful idea, stopping knight c4. Knight c4, knight d6 can be an important source of counterplay for white, obviously. After knight c4, knight d6, it may also slow down black's attack. But after b5, knight c4 is basically stopped once and for all. After a4, a6 should be done. And this was probably the last try for white, like trying to tie down the pieces on the 7th rank. But obviously, as you can see, black has too many pieces in this position towards the attack on the king side. From here, it was, we can say, it was a quick knockout. Rook g7, knight b3. On the other hand, you'll see like white is still trying to mobilize his pieces, rearranging his pieces, and basically he's just not ready for the upcoming attack. Knight h4. And when all the pieces walk into the right spot, it's time for sacrifice. Apparently, there are several ways to conclude. One of the ways is rook into f3 in this position. Bishop h3 was played in the game. A beautiful position where every piece is involved in the attack, and white is also trying to defend himself with almost all his pieces in the defense. Okay, we can say like probably the knight on b3 or knight on d3 or the rook on d1, they are not really participating in the battle, but otherwise like white also has mobilized all his pieces into defense, but usually like when one side is able to bring in all his resources to attack, it's very difficult to survive and defend after that. So that's why it's important to create counterplay. So what went wrong for white in this whole game was white's counterplay basically didn't take off on the queen side. I mean, he managed to open up a couple of lines, but there was no real threat that was coming in. Queen e2. And this was probably the finish. Queen h4 is the final winning move, where knight g3 is threatened, which is almost like a checkmate, and white basically gave up the queen. And I think the game continued for a few more moves, probably like another 4-5 moves from here before white resigned. I think all the King's Indian players who wish to understand the King's Indian better should study the books that's written by Gary Kasparov, all the My Great Predecessor's book, and basically like all the books that he has written. He made phenomenal research on all the King's Indian games, right from the inception of the King's Indian, like all the important plans that have been played and how he himself contributed towards the development of the King's Indian. So I hope this video is useful for all the King's Indian players, and I'll see you all of you guys in the next video then. Thank you.